Hello, welcome to today's live web discussion on the role of coal in the energy mix. I'm Nicolette Pombo-Fansale, editor of ESI Africa and one of your moderators for today's discussion. The landscape is changing as renewable energy capacity comes online, challenging coal's once dominant role in the energy mix. However, it's not just about energy, as coal mining is a strategic economic driver. In a recent IEA market report, global coal demand is set to remain stable over the next 5 years, with a slight decline from 27% in 2017 to 25% by 2023. Should investors be concerned about putting money into coal mines, and can clean coal tech create a market share in the renewable space? Joining me today are three panelists who will debate these questions among others. A warm welcome to Vuslat Baigulu, Managing Director of MRA Capital, Silas Zimu, former energy advisor in the Presidency South Africa, and an advisory board member of the African Utility Week and Power Gen Africa Conference and Exhibition, as well as Ted Blom, who is a mining and energy advisor. And lastly, my fellow moderator for today, Laura Cornish, who is the editor of Mining Review Africa. To find out more about the panelists, you can toggle through the speaker tab at the top of your screen. For those of you who are just joining us, welcome. Before we begin, take note of the following. On the left-hand side of your screen, you will find the Q&A box for you to use throughout the duration of the webinar. A recorded version of today's discussion will also be available to you to access from our website after the event. We asked you a survey when you registered for the webinar. And the webinar question was very interesting, as well as the results. The majority of mining professionals are clearly in favor of continued investment, while energy professionals seem to be at odds. Now, this could be because of renewables at play. Those in other sectors reflect a somewhat negative and undecided stance. And let's see if the panelists can sway your survey response. I will now ask each panelist to give a short opening statement. Vuslat, over to you.
Hi. So I want to share the first slide, which is the Last Supper, the most famous dinner visual done by Leonardo da Vinci. This visual reminds me the Western countries who are developed, they've done with their third industrial revolution, they're advancing their fourth industrial revolution. They're almost done with their supper, and South Africa comes and they want to eat as well. They say, no, no, supper is finished. So I don't think this is rational and this is fair, because I think coal and coal-fired power generation and renewables can work hand in hand. So I don't believe that they compete. They actually complement. And throughout this webinar, the questions that will be raised, I will try to show you scientifically why I think that renewables and coal-fired power generation complement each other, because there's huge need for power in the world. So that's my opening statement.
Thank you, Vuslat. Ted, let's hear what your stance is going to be during this debate.
Certainly. Thank you very much. So from a perspective that I start off is that I'm technology agnostic. Whatever sorts the problem is the solution as far as I'm concerned. However, I've come from the coal mining industry, and I've spent about 30 years in the coal mining industry. And I believe that there is a bright future for coal mining going forward, provided the players clean up the act. They've been caught with their pants under their knees by the renewables in the industry, and correctly now they are taking a hiding from the greenies, so to speak. But it's time for the coal people to get their act together, clean up the coal, and if they do that, certainly in terms of coal gasification, I think there's a massive future lying ahead for coal.
Thank you so much, Ted. I like the terminology where you say technology agnostic. Very interesting. Silas, if you could also give us your 1-minute opening statement.
Yeah, thank you. I think coal definition of base load compared to renewables doesn't give both any advantage to the other. They need to complement each other. We've got a long way on our energy transition to still be using coal, and I agree with the previous speakers. They should not be competing. Yes, Ted, I agree with you. We must find technologies that can make them to be less, if not non-polluting completely. Thank you.
Thanks, dear speakers. Let's jump right into the discussion. Silas, and I'd like to open up with my first question to you, please. And that question is, can coal and renewable energy be complementary?
Yes, coal has made our industry, has made our economy globally. And I think years ago, we were talking of renewables being still studied, being still researched, and as they came into the market, they should be complementing the coal. But the issue at the moment globally is we've got different leaders who are leading different institutions, either on coal or renewable, who seem to be competing when they should actually be working together. We don't seem to give research a lot of effort that it deserves that can make clean coal possible. There are countries that have started doing that. And I think instead of starting from scratch to do our own research, we just need to find out what those other countries have been doing and learn from them and improve on what they've been doing. So for me, they work hand in hand. Hence, from 2015, in South Africa, we started talking about the energy mix. And if you look at the IRP that needs to be approved and made public soon, it also has the energy mix. But if you look at just as much as coal for South Africa in our province of Mpumalanga has created a lot of jobs, renewables have started creating a lot of jobs in areas where there's never been any jobs, particularly the Eastern Cape and the Northern Cape.
Silas, thank you. I think the topic is really broad, and you started focusing on certain aspects of it. Ted, that leads me to another question, and that is the question of whether renewable energy structure is really affordable enough to actually consider discarding coal altogether.
Okay, so I think what one needs to do is just to get the definitions right, so that you compare apples with apples. The bottom line is that renewable energy, by and large, is not dispatchable. What does that mean? It means that it's not always available when you need it. It's pretty erratic at times. Whereas coal generation is generally available 24/7 unless it's scheduled for maintenance. So in order to get a renewable on the same baseload availability as coal, in other words, dispatchable, you would need massive backup storage for the times that renewable is not available. And if you do that, then you find that renewable 24/7 dispatchable electricity still comes at an incredibly high cost. In fact, factors of 10 times or more the cost of coal. So at the moment, I'd say that people are being confused by the marginal cost of electricity rather than the actual cost of dispatchable electricity. They don't understand the term dispatchable or available 24/7. And having come from the mining industry, I mean, I would not be able to send my miners underground if I didn't know that I had dispatchable available electricity at 4 o'clock this afternoon when their shift, or 6 o'clock when their shift ends, or if there's an emergency. It just wouldn't be a prudent and realistic thing to do. So at the end of the day, if you want to compare apples with apples and have the renewables together with its in tremendous expensive backup, which will change over time. But for the moment, renewable as a base load is not affordable.
Yes, thanks very much for your comments on that. Buslat, I'd like to turn to you now, please. As one of the few investors of coal in mining in South Africa, can you tell me why you think coal has a future in the region?
Okay, so I will also share some slides on this part. So the first one that I'm sharing is the world energy consumption by energy sources. This is an information, the source is the U.S. Energy Information Association, and this is a projection until 2040, what's going to happen in the world. And if you look at this slide, it shows clearly that fossil fuels has a place in power generation. So petroleum and other liquids share a huge piece, and then coal is increasing, then it's becoming stable, natural gas is increasing, renewables are increasing obviously dramatically, and then nuclear is flat. So this shows that there's a future for coal, because I will share later on that the world is building coal-fired power stations. So as I said earlier, renewables and coal do not compete. They complement each other because the world needs energy. If you go to my next slide, it shows the energy consumption by region. Again, the same source, U.S. Energy Information Association, this slide shows that there's a huge increase in power needs by 2040 in Asia and Middle East. Africa is doubled. And the flat one is Europe. And interesting enough, they are the lobbyists for renewable energy, but their energy demand is not increasing. So they are actually intervening on other parts of the world and saying, guys, you must do it in this fashion. But the reality is the growth is in Asia, Middle East, and Africa. And next slide I'm sharing is the total coal consumption in the world in 2016 and 2017. If you look at Chinese coal consumption, it's about 3.7 billion tons a year they consume coal. And then next is India, close to 1 billion ton. And then United States, about 800 million ton per annum. Europe is consuming a similar amount like United States. Then Southeast Asia follows them, Russia and Japan. So there is a huge coal consumption in the world. That is a reality. And this is because the world needs energy. So next slide that I'm going to share with you is a comparison between U.S. and China electricity supply in 2017. If you look at this slide, China is producing most of its energy from coal. There is a bit of natural gas, nuclear, wind, hydro, and solar, but the reality is coal is there in China and the United States. And then when we come to home, South African electricity supply sources in 2017, my sources Eskom's integrated report in 2017, it shows that Eskom generates 37,000 megawatts from coal, and then it follows, hydro follows it, natural gas, nuclear, solar, and wind. So there are some IPPs on wind and solar and natural gas, but again, the biggest reality is coal. South Africa has got coal-fired power stations, and we need them. So my next slide is showing the 1,600 new coal plants, which is announced in process of being built in 62 countries. So this will increase the world coal-fired power capacity by 43%. So coal-fired power stations are a reality. It's happening. Then I want to quickly mention about the technologies that is available to deal with the carbon dioxide emission and SOx and NOx gases, which are actually standard filter mechanism that deals with the CO2, but obviously it doesn't deal with everything. But then there's CCS, which is carbon capture and storage. There are applications in many parts of the world, and this is going to deal with the carbon dioxide emission. So when the technology develops, we are getting electric vehicles, we are dealing with renewables, and we also deal with the carbon dioxide emissions and NOx and SOx gases emissions out of coal-fired power stations. So another one that I want to share with you, my next slide is South Africa has got coal reserves, which is amounted to 30.8 billion tons. And with the current production capacity, which is 160 million tons per annum, we can mine 118 years. So for any country, if you've got this kind of reserve and you've got so much long life, what you do is you increase your production capacity, because you don't know what's going to happen in 20 years with the technology. Your coal reserves might be useless. Hence, it's important for South Africa to deal with this coal-fired power generation capacity. Instead of decreasing it, keep it same or increase it, because there's also social aspects of it. Not only you've got reserves and you have to deplete and you have to turn it into a commercial value, you must also look at the employees. Like this industry employs 86,000 people. And if you, this government's IRP strategy that they want to remove they want to decline the coal-fired power station 30%. I don't know if it's really realistic, because what's going to happen to the people that's employed by the coal mining industry? So, which is critical for South Africa. This industry pays 25 billion rand in wages. So it's critical for South Africa to deplete this resource as much as possible. My last slide on this topic, Laura, is it shows the coal resources of South Africa, of the major listed mining companies, which is currently supplying coal to Eskom and export markets. If you look at this, Exxaro is the largest coal producer in the country. They have also they've been controlling 38% of the coal resources. South 32 controls 32%. Glencore controls 17%. Seriti controls 4%. These are the mines that they bought from Anglo. And Optimum controls 4%, and Anglo American controls 5%. So the reality is we have coal, we got good resources in this country, and we need power to industrialize country further, to create jobs and deal with the community issues and make the country more stable. We need coal mining, we need coal-fired power generation, and we also need renewables.
Thank you so much. I just want to remind the audience that they can send their questions in. The questions that we have received at the earlier part of today, I think a lot of those questions have been answered by our three panelists already, but very interesting. Laura, please continue. Thank you.
Brilliant. So continuing with the discussion, Ted, let me ask you a next question. What do you think is being done to facilitate research around improving the efficiency of converting coal to electricity?
Okay, so the technology is basically over 100 years old, and mainstream producers, whilst they've kept their R&D departments alive, haven't really come up with radical new technology. However, I'm fortunate in that I've got a couple of entrepreneurs who contact me from time to time, and I think the future in coal usage and deployment is clean coal. And one of the ways of cleaning up coal and virtually eliminating pollution or residue pollution is by micronizing the coal. In other words, you take it down to molecular level, and you then scrub it or wash it and clean out all the polluting elements, and then you're basically left with a very clean carbon-based product, which has an incredible fluid and flow statistics. It's actually quite amazing. Now, what surprises me is that this research has been done by private laboratories and not the mainstream Exxaros and South 32s and Glencores. It seems to me those companies are all focusing on maximizing their current the deployment. This research comes from really off-the-cuff entrepreneurs who've now really spent lots of their own money, hard-pressed money, to prove this technology and the improvements available by micronizing the coal. So I'm very bullish, because once you get to the molecular level of coal, the behavior starts very differently. Besides having very clean properties, it's also got amazing transport abilities and affinity, as well as application flexibility. I really think that the world is just beginning to open in terms of doing beneficiation of coal. As I said, for the best part of 100 years, the technology has been very stagnant. In the last 30 years, there's been some effort to enhance coal quality to a higher grade by taking out the particulate pollutants. But when you get down to micro level, I mean, that's when it's a whole new world. And I'm incredibly excited by what I've seen.
Brilliant, Ted. Thanks for your insight there. With that, let me come back to you, particularly because you are an investor that has such a strong passion for coal in particular. And with that in mind, getting back to the heart of what this debate is all about, which is renewables versus coal. And let me ask, what is your opinion? Do you think investors should still be putting money into coal mines?
Okay, I think, like I earlier said, coal has got a future, at least in the foreseeable future, in the world. Somebody is going to mine the coal and move it to the markets. So if you look at the big coal-producing countries in the world, South Africa is the sixth biggest. Indonesia is a very big producer. Australia is a very big producer, and they supply a lot of coal to Southeast Asia and Asia. And South Africa is a big supplier of coal to India. And when India sorts its own problems about power production, then there's huge capacity for South African coal to be burned. And because of the proximity of South Africa to India, it's a huge market for South Africa. Europe is no longer buying. It's only 10% of the RBCT coal is going to Europe. Most of the coal is going to Asia. But the reality of the population in India and the way that they need to develop the country in terms of infrastructure-wise, when they boom like China did boom, then I think South Africa is not going to be producing enough to supply for that market. And then the other market for South African coal producers is local market, Eskom. Eskom needs coal. Eskom has got power stations, and it was all paid out in terms of capital. Eskom has got problems, we all know that, but instead of criticizing Eskom, I think what we should do is we should try to find out how we can help Eskom, because if Eskom fails, country will fail. We will all fail. So we need to make sure that Eskom is successful. We need to help government, current administration, to find ways and to support them to resolve the issues at Eskom. So once the problems at Eskom is solved, that means Eskom will burn more coal. They are busy with Medupi and Kusile, which is a year and a half or 2 years later they will be both fully operational. That would mean also again more coal. So world needs coal, but the lobby in Europe has tainted coal so badly, and it's like coal is unwanted. But the reality is, think about it. Rio Tinto is out of coal. They've got no thermal coal assets left. Southern is getting out of coal. They are selling their assets. Anglo American sold their Eskom coal assets, and they've got very limited export coal assets. So who's going to mine this coal and supply to the world? So the reality is, if we leave, if the investors leave it to one company, it's going to be also to the detriment of the world's coal-fired power energy cost. Okay, so I'm thinking that there's a huge room for investors to look at coal mining and invest in coal mining, because mainly two markets: South African inland market and India on its own. Huge market to supply from South Africa. And remember, we've got a great infrastructure in this country. We got the skills. We got Transnet, which is quite good performing, and we got a state-of-the-art coal terminal, which is the largest coal terminal in the world, Richards Bay Coal Terminal. So why don't we use this infrastructure to make it work for the benefit of the investors in coal mining?
Can I just add there, please?
Of course, Ted.
Okay, so just to add some numbers to what Wuslata said, Eskom is really on the bones of its behind in terms of coal procurement. They've really missed the boat. And the forward plan, which I've been monitoring very closely, especially with the hearings going on, Eskom needs to commit to at least 100 million tons of coal for the next 20 to 30 years. And that means massive new coal mine investment, because the Mickey Mouse players from which they're buying at the moment cannot provide sustainable, good quality, cheap coal. And as Wuslat said, these power stations are there. They've been amortized by and large. A lot of them are overcosted anyway, so Eskom shouldn't be allowed to build too many new power stations. Maybe the private sector can come in, but it can only come in if it shows an aptitude and an appetite for investing in coal. And if I knew there was a market of 100 million tons a year for at least the next 15 to 20 years, guaranteed, I mean, there's no reason why one shouldn't look at that very favorably.
Okay, thanks.
Laura, I want to add something. I want to add something.
Of course.
Sorry. Quickly, I want to add something. What Ted mentioned about the coal procurement. So we need to understand one thing clear, and I mentioned this in a call conference in the morning. What Eskom needs is some transparency in what they're doing. Okay, especially when they buy the coal, because at the moment what they do is they buy from different companies at different prices. So if you're green, they pay you 15 rand a gigajoule. If you're red, they pay you 17 rand a gigajoule. If you are blue, then they pay you 22 rand a gigajoule. This cannot work like that, because this causes corruption. It cannot be left in the hands of a few individuals to make a decision on what price they're going to pay and how they negotiate. So if I've got good negotiation power, then they may pay me more. If somebody doesn't have that, they will pay less for the same quality coal. So how we can solve this problem is it's simple. We need an index pricing for Eskom quality coal. Okay, so let's say if they're burning between 20 and 24 CV product, there can be a price for a certain quality coal, let's say 20 CV product, and then there can be a price for a high quality coal, let's say 23 or 24 CV product. Then it's a demand and supply. If I've got coal and if I'm prepared to supply to Eskom at a cheap price, then I will do that. That's my choice. But if I don't want to supply at that price, I'll wait for the index price to be increased. So if Eskom needs more coal, then they may decide to pay the right price. And when I say this, I'm excluding the cost plus mines, because I think cost plus mines is a necessity for this country as long as the cost is under control. Because I saw mines like Arnott Colliery, cost was completely out of control, and Eskom decided to close it. There was another reason why they closed the mine, but the main reason was the cost was out of control. So long-term contracts, yes, they must be there, because that deals with the average cost of coal, and that drops the average cost of coal. But when they buy on spot, there has to be a mechanism, and everybody has to see it. If TED supplies coal to Eskom, and if Wuslat supplies coal to Eskom, if it's the same quality, the price should be same. The price should not differ. So that's very important point regarding what Eskom is doing.
If I may reply to Wuslat, I'm at the hearings on Monday, the Eskom price hearings, and I'm going to drop a bombshell about this price discrepancy that you just highlighted, that pink people get paid more than green people get paid more than blue people and you pay brown people. So, and some politicians have got their fingers in that pie. So, if you watch the Eskom hearings on Monday, you will certainly get a bombshell being dropped in my presentation at those hearings.
Yeah, I think we've got something that Ted has raised, and I think it can't be ignored. You know, Eskom is burning the coal, and we get pollution. But that coal, who is the originator, owner of that coal before Eskom buys it? It's the coal mines. So we need to find a way of the coal mines investing into getting clean coal from their products. It can't be left for Eskom, and Eskom alone is blamed for the pollution. Do they have a choice? Because everybody that is still blaming them when they get home, they still want to switch on their lights, and the lights should be on. So everybody has to come into the game as to how do we get into this clean coal. So I believe the coal mines can add some little value add on their products, on researching and ensuring that, you know, their products are now less pollution, or completely eliminate the pollution. It can be done. The other thing is this one of the price. I fully agree, really. If a South African mine finds it best for them to export coal instead of giving Eskom first priority at the right price, And remember, Eskom is selling this energy to our wives, to our families. So when we're sitting in these boardrooms of these companies, we should not behave as if it's only affecting me and other people that are complaining are people that I don't know. It's affecting everybody that is living where you're living, except if you're not a South African, you're operating from outside. Then I would agree, and maybe we should not even have a deal with you.
Okay, so just to put a number to it, the irregular expenditure by Eskom on coal, as has been highlighted here today, I did a presentation in PE last week on that, and that quantum is around about 40 billion rand a year. I repeat, 40 billion rand a year of irregular expenditure on the coal side that isn't regulated, as Wuslat has suggested and as Silas has suggested, in an orderly fashion. There's a lot of it goes into people's back pockets, etc., etc. And that is my plea to the regulator on Monday, is to force Eskom to clean up the transparency in its coal procurement program. I've offered to help. Eskom has said they want my help, but that's as far as we seem to get every time. The corruption is at least 3 billion rand a month. It's a lot of money to go into people's back pockets. And it's costing you and me and Eskom 40 billion rand a year more than what it should be if everything was regularized on long-term contracts. Thank you.
Silas, let me pick up where we left off, and we were talking about the fact that coal is important for the country, regardless of what we need to take it forward. But let's look at it from another aspect as well. What do you think, Silas, would happen to the coal resources in Africa if we did not use them for power generation?
There's not much outside the power generation that they can be used for, except if we then allow companies like Sasol to be all across the continent. But, the whole world economy has been run through coal. And there's power stations that are 70, 75 year older, where they're still operating, and we're complaining about our power stations that are 35, 40 years old. So it might have to do with the management of those power stations, how we've been maintaining them over the years, and how much have we investing of our revenues back into the operational and maintenance budget. South Africa is not good in reinvesting in their assets, and that includes research and development. So I think it won't be fair for Africa to be instructed not to use its coal reserves when the coal is in Africa. How else are we going to make sure that that continent is easily lit at a cheaper rate? If we can get the prices right, we can then get all these arguments of the hearings right, because it would be cost reflective, and there's no way that you'll get your tariffs right if you're sourcing from different at different prices from different people. I mean, how do you then budget? So I agree fully. The issue of coal price have to be kept. We have to classify coal and give it a value so that it could make the life of Eskom easy, and it will be easy for them to budget and forecast and project over the coming 15 years. Then all of us, as the citizens, as the constituency of this beautiful country, can then know ahead of the times that electricity price will be going up or down or remain stagnant. Our social challenge alone doesn't allow for our current formulas on how we're running our electricity industry.
May I comment on that? Okay, so if we get our electricity price to what I consider a pre-corruption price, then our electricity tariff should halve. We should not be paying more than 40 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity in today's terms. And if you want to really make it easy and benefit the nation, the cost of collecting and reading electricity meters is probably more than the cost of the electricity that's consumed. So I think that if we can just get rationality, we clean up the corruption at Eskom, we clean up the 40 billion in wasted money on the coal contracts, We clean up the 31 billion in excess staff headcount at Eskom, and one or two other corruption issues. We can reduce the coal price, the electricity price to below 40 cents a kilowatt hour, and have plenty of money to amortize the enormous debt that this organization is sitting on. So I'm very positive. We hold hands and we work together, and we stop the corruption. I think the big thing is that's really getting everybody hot under the collar is the goddamn corruption. I mean, it's busy killing this economy, and it's pervasive. As recent Bosasa hearings have seen, and so forth. We need to rid our economy of this corruption, and then we've all got a bright future together.
Thank you so much, everyone. We've had some incredible questions coming through from the audience, but what I would like to start off with is around the rest of Africa. We have been talking a lot about South Africa, but what about coal opportunities in the rest of the continent? This is a question that we could raise and then take this conversation forward. With that, if you would like to start.
It's a coal mining opportunities the rest of Africa. So, South Africa obviously is the biggest producer in the African continent. We've got lots of coal in Botswana and massive resource base, but the issue is it's a landlocked country. First, South African coal should be depleted before South Africa looks at like getting coal from Botswana. That's my opinion. And they may consider putting up coal-fired power stations and do supply other parts of Africa from Botswana. That could be one of the ways to mine the coal and generate power. Zimbabwe has got coal reserves. It's metallurgical coal and also thermal coal, but Zimbabwe has got its own predicaments at the moment, and they haven't solved their issues. Mozambique has got huge deposits, again thermal and coking coal. Vale is a big investor there, and they're mining. They invested massively on the rail infrastructure. They're mining and taking it out of Nacala and Nacala port of Mozambique. So these are the main places. So there are coal deposits in Zambia and Tanzania as well, but they're more like for local markets. Plus, there are projects that I see that in Tanzania they want to generate coal-fired power, also in Zambia. So this is an overview about Southern Africa, what's happening and what can be done. But again, South Africa has got the infrastructure and the resources, reserves. Hence, South Africa has got is a leader for coal mining in the continent.
Ashley, can I add?
Oh, Ashley? Thank you so much. I was like, Ted, would you like to add to that? Yes.
So let Silas go first. Silas, go.
Okay, thanks, Ted. I think South Africa is missing the opportunity of becoming the energy hub for sub-Saharan, at least sub-Saharan. We are good in high voltage transmission lines. We've been good in generating energy. We are supplying nearly every one who is our neighboring states, probably except Mozambique. And we should actually be saying we're going to add more or ensure that our current fleet of power stations are going to be maintained and refurbished so as we can supply Africa, with the continent with energy. The lenders are here. They would support that. In other parts of our continent, there's no lenders who want to put money in there. Actually, you will be surprised that Swaziland and Botswana, with all their good coal reserves, they actually want South Africa to be the off-taker and give a power purchase agreement when their own communities, some don't have electricity. We should not allow that. They should start with their own and give us what is extra, and then we can take. But we still have a good chance of supplying our whole continent as South Africa. We don't have that much gold anymore. We've got a lot of energy to give to our continent.
If I can just start to Silas there, I think it's an opportunity that's really not being maximized at the moment, and a lot of it is due to misdemeanors and bad behavior by Eskom. I mean, I'm fully aware that there was a major agreement between South Africa as Eskom and Botswana as early as 2006. And then Eskom came, the Eskom officials at that time, and I'll be testifying about that at Zondo Commission. The Eskom officials were asking for kickbacks and interest for their family and all sorts of misdemeanors, which is really, I mean, that's what really gets me hot under the collar. Silas is right. South Africa certainly has been a hub of energy in the South African power pool, the SAPP, and as the opportunity to go wider. I'm aware of massive shortages of energy in Zambia. Zambia is looking to build nearly 10 gigawatts of new capacity to sort out the beneficiation of their copper. I'm aware of massive shortages of power in the southern Congo. And the Congo is a big country. It's cheaper for them to link into the southern African grid than to actually put up their own grids anew. So there are major opportunities. Even in Tanzania, their coal is not a fantastic quality. It lies right next to Malawi. Malawi's got negligible coal, but Tanzania's got major coal. But that also is all virgin stuff. It's all virgin projects. The time is now. The place is here. And it's time for the South African business people and especially the government to sort out the corruption and grasp the baton and get going as fast as possible. We're not building our future as we should be because we're all hesitant and we're waiting for each other. We need to open our mouths and start shooting the criminal.
Thank you so much, Ted. I'd like to ask Silas around investment. Is this something that the development bank should be looking at as well, or who should be investing in the coal market?
Look, my understanding of the investors and a lot of our lenders is that they would invest in clean coal power generation. They're not saying they hate coal. There's lots of scary stories about people living around the power stations that are ill, and I think if it can be proven, then it gets more scarier. But you know, we will be forced by the investors to go clean, and there are technologies that can help us do that. So it's not true that the investors are not into coal. I mean, no coal mine in South Africa is not funded by the same lenders. So, but they want to see a change. They want to ensure that communities live healthier. And I think it's upon us as engineers to ensure that happens. The quicker we come up with those solutions and present to them, the more money would be coming into these programs. But at the moment, we've got many other things that are making investors and lenders scared of coal. If you look at how long it took us to build Medupi and Kusile, I mean, I can't comment more on that. But if you're going to allow the same time to build new stations, nobody's going to invest. Nobody's going to invest, whether it's renewable or coal. So the private sector has got an opportunity, having proven on the IPP side that they do adhere to their timelines, to come into the game as long as they can also create jobs as much as Eskom is expected to create jobs. So to me, the end product would be the energy. I don't even know where it comes from now in my house, whether it's from Medupi or Majuba or Letabo Power Station. Anyway, all I want is that it should get to me when I want it.
Thank you so much. I have another audience question, which I would like to pose to Vuslat this time, and that is around who should improve the beneficiation of coal to achieve clean coal? Coal mines, is it IPPs, is it maybe Eskom?
So there are different stages. It starts with the mining and the processing of the coal. When you process coal and you target to process coal in such a way that you deal with the sulfur, you produce the sulfur as low as possible, let's say less than 1% or less than 0.5%, depends on the target of the power station. Obviously, that affects the bad gases that gets out of the chimneys of the power station. So it starts with processing the coal. Then, when it's burned in the power station, then a power station has to deal with capturing the CO2, dealing with the emissions. That's why I earlier mentioned about carbon capture storages or filter systems that's used in coal-fired power stations. But I wanna also add something. When I look at the audience, what they're asking, I feel like some people do not know the regulations in this country. They think like if you want to go and start a coal mine, it takes a month or 2 months, and you mine as you wish, and then you just pollute the environment. ESCOM does the same things. I think that's wrong, because we've got systems in this country. To get a mining right, it's a process. To get a water use license, it's a process. When you start today, it takes almost 2.5, 3 years to start a mine. And you have to follow the processes. You have to make sure that your impact to the environment is minimal. You have to make sure that your impact to the water resources are minimal. We are living in the same environment. Nobody wants to leave a bad legacy to their kids and say, and the kids will be pointed, oh, your dad did this to the environment. No, there are rules in this country. So, and the policeman is the Department of Mineral Resources. And believe it or not, but it works. They are good policemen. They go and check the mines regularly, and they make sure that the mines are complying according to the Mining Works Program, Environmental Impact Assessment, Environmental Management Program, and it works. So if you go and visit any coal mine, Anglo-Americans, South 32s, Kenyan coals, Exxaros, there are rules that are complied with. So the mines are trying their best to make sure that they impact the environment the least. They impact the water resources the least. Obviously, there are exceptions. So I want to think positive. And I also want to think positive about ESCOM. I understand, like Ted points out the issues, and I agree with him. There are big issues. But how can we solve it? There's a new administration. Can we give them a chance? Can we believe in them and tell them, listen, in the previous management, this is what happened. They paid more to this company, more to that company. They're paying the trucking companies double than the normal market-related rate. Can you please deal with this? And then let's watch them. Let's watch them closely. So I want to really think positive and then see if the new administration, ESCOM, makes it possible. I know it's a big mission. It's really difficult, but I believe that we have very good human skills in this country, and I believe in the people of South Africa that they can deal with this issue, which is like I said, which is a huge issue for the country. Because if ESCOM, like I said earlier, if ESCOM fails, we're going to be in trouble. So we need to make sure that ESCOM makes it work.
Thank you for that, Zislat. I'd like to ask Ted to respond to a question that we received from the audience that asks about the term baseload and whether this is still something that should be used in our future energy grids, or should we be looking at energy differently? Is baseload something that should not be addressed at all?
Okay, so it's an interesting question. Thank you very much for that. So the first thing is that the abolition of baseload comes directly from the mouths of the renewable industry, because they don't have dispatchable or baseload energy. I mean, it depends on what terminology you want to use. The bottom line is, in most industry, if you want to run a heavy industry, like the mining industry or the smelting industry, or any industry where the use of the electricity is user critical, you cannot not have or ignore the term baseload or dispatchable, because at the end of the day, if it's not available, you have critical consequences. So as much as the renewable industry would like to say, you must temper your demand as and when electricity is available, that's not the reality that we're living in at the moment. And until they put up enough storage to compete on an equal footing, the term baseload and baseload suppliers will be with us forever, especially more so in a country that's heavily dependent on its future in beneficiation of its minerals. You need industrial level power. If you have the best renewables at the moment in terms of output, are probably the salt-based renewable stations, molten salt-based stations, and the most power that they can put out is around about 300 odd megawatts. to get to the proper furnaces and smelting that we use for smelting industrial base minerals, we need power to be able to consistently run at a much higher level than that. And hence, I don't think the playing fields are level. And until the technology catches up on the renewable side, we will stay with baseload.
We're looking at the energy mix in South Africa. What is the ideal balance? And this is a question that has come through from quite a few people.
Okay, so I think at the end of the day, the academic studies that have been done show that as soon as you start increasing your renewable mix above 30%, you start picking up unpredictability in your grid. So from what I've read, and I don't have hands-on experience, and I don't want hands-on experience because I don't want to melt down in my grid, but seemingly the current safety level for renewables is around about 30% of capacity.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid we've reached the end. We're going to have to wrap up now. Laura, please take over.
Thanks. In closing, on behalf of myself and Nicolette, I'd like to thank our guest speakers for their contribution and their expertise, and also to our guests for tuning in. I trust it's been an informative session for everyone. I'd also like to remind you that there is a recorded version of today's discussion, which will be available to access from either the Mining Review or the ESI Africa website. And also to note that the topic will be discussed further in a panel discussion next week at the Mining Indaba conference in Cape Town, which I will be moderating and that Buslat will also be participating in. So I hope to see you all there. Once again, thanks very much for tuning in.